Welcome to episode 23 of the Eyes on Privacy podcast. This week I'm joined by Josh Gillum, and I'm Preston Wiley. Keith is occupied at the moment, so he was not able to join us. But we have three articles that we're going to discuss this week, and I'll just start with the first one. The first one is an article on Bruce Schneier's blog, Schneier on Security. And he basically talks about how kind of I'd say the bad reporting by the media about how the Edward Snowden revelations are not having an impact on internet users is what various headlines have read, and that he's not having a big impact. Bruce Schneier completely disagrees with that. And based on his data, he's determined that approximately 706 million people have changed their behavior on the internet because of what the NSA and GCHQ are doing. Even though the numbers may sound low, like only 39% of people are taking steps to protect their privacy post-Snowden, it's a big step up from what it was before the Snowden revelations existed. So I thought that was interesting because I've read a lot of stuff from the media about this Snowden thing, it's not really making an impact. But when you really dig into the numbers, you get a pretty big number of 706 million people have changed their behavior because of the NSA and GCHQ. So I thought this was something interesting to discuss for a little bit.
Yeah, obviously you can't say exactly a hard number, so I'm curious to where he's calculated his numbers from. But I feel like just the overall, just the publicity about security in general or privacy in general is going to, there's a lot of free publicity for that, and so people are going to hear about it, and I think as people get educated, they're going to start making those changes. So I think that was a great avenue to educate users just in general security practices, and not, so as Snowden maybe was trying to say, hey, look how crazy the NSA is doing, all these very questionable pathways that they're doing, it's still going to help people just overall change their habits.
Right, and one example that's pointed out is 17% of Indonesians use the internet, and 64% of them have heard of Snowden, and 62% of them have taken steps to protect their privacy, which is equivalent to 17 million people out of a total of 250 million population. And I think he also notes that most of the people that did take steps probably wouldn't have really made a difference against the NSA level of surveillance, but they did take steps to protect their privacy. So, I think the NSA is probably right there at the top. If they want to get at your data, then they're probably going to get at your data, but protecting yourself even from the low-hanging, someone who's just kind of going around the internet just looking for things is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree. Interesting to see that, because I just get a viewpoint of Americans. I don't get to associate with too many people outside the U.S. So it's interesting to hear that a lot of countries, such as Indonesia, has heard about them as, they're making steps too. So it's affecting people worldwide, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and the last thing that he points out is there any other news story that you can think of that has caused 10% of the world's population to change their behavior in the past year? So I think in a lot of respects, even if 1% of the entire internet population changes their behavior because of the Snowden revelations, that's a lot of people. I think that's kind of the argument there, and and just because it may go from 30% to 35% of people are doing stuff, that's still a lot of people, which is, I think it says it covered 4.7 billion out of 7 billion of the total world population. So when you think of 1% of 4.7 billion, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to the next article, and we're kind of on an NSA, I guess an NSA theme this week. The next one has to do with Google, and the CEO of Google, or the Google chairman, Eric Schmidt, has said that if you want to keep your sensitive data away from the NSA, use Google. Basically, he's going on after the whole Snowden revelations and specifically the news of the targeting of Google by the NSA, that Google has taken significant steps in order to keep your data secure from the NSA, from a point-to-point encryption between their data centers, encryption within their data centers, encrypting data on their servers, etc., etc., etc. Eric Schmidt basically is saying that Google is essentially taking the necessary steps to protect itself. And I'm not sure if I'm convinced, but that's what he said.
Yeah, some of the other things that he commented about, he was saying that, which sort of questions what he's saying, is that he was noted saying that using the incognito mode in Chrome is a way to protect yourself from the NSA, and that's just not a valid statement. And it was just, when he can blindly say that, it makes you question how accurate his other assumptions are. I mean, yes, they've probably made some security updates to their environment, but does the NSA still have a hand in their pocket? Probably. And that was just...
Well, he basically said that the incognito mode, which is available in pretty much all browsers, is basically makes it much difficult for websites to track you. And he also said that basically they've upped their encryption. They're using, I think, 248-bit encryption, which shouldn't be able to be decrypted within our lifetime. And my question is, they're Google. They're in the U.S. We've heard articles about the far-reaching court orders that the U.S. is trying to enforce. For example, the court order that Microsoft has to was served a warrant for data on a server in Ireland, and they're trying to be made to comply with that order. In fact, the courts told them to comply, but Microsoft said, well, we're not going to comply until we appeal it. Google, being a U.S. company, just kind of is still, I think, a bad kind of somewhat a bad thing for them in a sense. It looks bad because the U.S. is trying to take their influence and spreading it across the globe with U.S. companies. So, and the principal technologist for the American Civil Liberties Union also said he was not impressed, and that the incognito mode will do nothing to protect users from government surveillance. So, I'm not quite sure if I agree. But I think I do agree that Google has done some things to the stuff that they know about that the NSA kind of was able to get their hands in, their unencrypted data between data centers and things like that.
Yeah. So I think they made an overall good security change, but it sort of goes back to the same discussion we had on the last the last article. is yes, as they've improved, good practices for their environment, it's still probably not as far as it needs to be, but it's at least a good step forward.
Yeah, and well, and kind of on the same subject of Google and security and U.S. companies, we'll move on to the third article that we're talking about, which is the U.S. Congress okays an unprecedented codification of warrantless surveillance. From my understanding, and there's a decades-old presidential decree, which was known as Executive Order 12333, which was a controversial Reagan-era decree that granted broad surveillance authority to the president. And that has been the basis of a lot of surveillance activity, including, I think, the massive gathering of data by the NSA. But recently, I think a bill went through the Senate that codified this executive order, basically moving it from an executive order to a law, and there was there actually wasn't a lot of hoopla about this bill until I think somebody bothered to actually read it, and they saw some interesting things in it. Basically, the law was said that they could essentially retain data that was gathered, and it set a time limit of 5 years on the time that the data could be gathered, except for data that had to do with foreign intelligence or counterintelligence, contained evidence of a crime, or are enciphered or reasonably believed to have a secret meaning, among other conditions. So a lot of ifs in that in the statement. I don't know. From reading this brief article, it seems like a lot of stuff was kind of snuck through the courts. But I mean, should we worry about the codification? I mean, the NSA was doing it anyway, but it seems to me like they're not trying to really stop it. They're just trying to make it even more legitimate.
Yeah, and the concern, I guess first to answer your question, I mean, yeah, I agree that it's not going to make a difference that they that it's now a law versus just the versus just the dang it, now my mind just blanked, versus the executive order, but in the same sense, you're looking at it as it was just sort of legal, or at least allowable, and now it's like moved into this next thing where it's like giving it a bigger foot to stand on, per se, where obviously we would like to move the other direction. But because when you look at this, like, I read enciphered meaning that if that data is encrypted, they're going to keep it forever until they can unencrypt it. Reasonably believed to have a secret meaning, you could come up, I think you could argue anything to say, well, I thought it had a secret meaning to it. I wasn't exactly sure. So the 5-year thing, where they can only hold the data for 5 years, I think they have plenty of open areas where they can argue for longer than 5 years on any type of data. So yeah, I mean, this is just helping the NSA's case more versus trying to draw back their powers, or their, I guess, draw back their powers.
Yeah, I think this is essentially the Congress condoning what the NSA surveillance, where, you know, when the Snowden revelations came out, we had a lot of people in Congress saying, "What? Oh man, this isn't good. They shouldn't be doing this." But, you know, a year later, it seems like, well, they either don't care anymore, or their reactions were just a political ploy, essentially, to make it look like they were freaked out. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Not to be naive or whatever, but that's sort of the way I see it was. It was just they were showing face of what they thought they had to show for the American people, and this sort of is like, really, we think it was a good idea. But as an average citizen, I will never fully know the true meaning behind all of this. But from outside looking in, it's very questionable. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if you read the article, it says the bill was rushed to the floor of the House for a vote, and there's a lot of, I mean, it wasn't read very well, and there was just a lot of troubling stuff about the bill and all that. So, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the president has, from my understanding, the president hasn't signed it yet, so it's not law. But I guess there's a petition on a petition that you can on WhiteHouse.gov that you can that has looks like has a total of 9,034 signatures and needs 90,966 more signatures to actually mean anything, because it needs 100,000 signatures. So yeah, doesn't seem like it's getting anywhere close to that. But I guess we'll see what happens. And with that, those are the 3 articles that we had for this week. Do we have any other comments?
Not too much, other than try to just keep improving your security, and as we slowly get it, we'll keep the ball rolling, and hopefully it'll be a big snowball effect as we get more and more secure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're not going to be doing a podcast for the rest of the year, because we got the Christmas and we got the New Year's holidays coming up, and so Happy New Year now, because we'll probably not have our next podcast will be in 2015. Hopefully Keith will be able to join us then. And thank you, Josh Gillum. I'm Preston Wiley, and keep your eyes on privacy.